Welcome to Coffee Talk, dear listeners. This is the sister podcast of Crescent City Crime. I'm Tracy.
And I'm Brian.
And thank you to everybody who listens to us. We always appreciate you tuning in. Welcome to anybody who may be new. If you are new and you, for some reason, just randomly picked this episode to start with, about once a month we do try to take a break from murder and mayhem and discuss other bits of history from the city of New Orleans.
Yes, thank you. We enjoy having your company. We love to talk to you.
So, if you are not subscribed to us, go ahead and do so. We're on every podcasting platform, and we are also on YouTube. And today's topic is going to be about something that people come to New Orleans for, and something that citizens of New Orleans deeply appreciate, and that is food.
Oh yes, yes. We are easily a top 5 city for food in the country, arguably number 1.
Well, probably, yeah. And in fact, I was talking to somebody at my day job recently about how if you don't have flavor in your food, I don't want it.
Yes, yes. Like a perfect example of a city that people do not travel to for food is of course London. just to give one example, okay. People from London will straight up tell you, yes, their food is bland.
People come from London, or will come from England to the city of New Orleans, and they, like, I've heard about how, for example, one of the things in England is that they don't get the fresh produce that we can get in America because they don't really have that sunny climate like how we do in some parts of this country.
Yeah, like we do down south.
Or even in California. A lot of our produce is grown in California.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
But today we're not really talking about produce. We are talking about sandwiches, specifically po' boys.
Yep.
And every region in this country has a different take on unique sandwiches. Subway sandwiches, they're called grinders, heroes, hoagies, torpedoes, but we call it a po' boy.
Yep.
Every sandwich has their own subtle qualities and history, but a proper po' boy comes on freshly baked Italian French bread with a crusty exterior and a soft interior. And there are so many different variations. You could be like Bubba from Forrest Gump when he's talking about shrimp. You could talk about all the different po' boys that we could create out here in New Orleans.
Yes, yeah. Okay. There's variations on French bread. Some good, some not so good. An example of an excellent variation of French bread is from Dong Phuong, which is a Vietnamese bakery located out in New Orleans East. They have a unique version of French bread that is distinctly different from the Italian variation or the traditional French variation. It's quite different, and it's so good that there are local supermarkets that do feature it.
Yeah, it is. It's quite good. It is quite good. But typically a po' boy will have some sort of seafood in it, catfish or shrimp, oysters. But then, of course, there's also the non-seafood varieties. Like there's hot sausage, there's hamburger po' boys, and roast beef po' boys. Like I said, you could really go on and on.
Yeah, roast beef is extremely popular, especially with gravy.
Yes.
With the roast beef debris in it as well. And a bit about the hamburger po' boys. You have to be careful where you get a hamburger po' boy in this town. Yes. That's the one po' boy that you have to order with caution, because there are places that have hamburger po' boys that use, pretty low quality
meat.
Yeah, freezer meat, because this is a type of establishment that has the hamburger po' boy for the kids.
Right.
And so it's but there are places that do a really awesome hamburger or cheeseburger po' boy, like Lee's Hamburgers, for example, like 3 different locations in Jefferson Parish. Their hamburger po' boys are done on the Italian variation of French bread, and yeah, as far as like a hamburger cheeseburger po' boy goes, they are to die for. I don't get the cheeseburger variation because the excellent Italian French bread overshadows the grated cheese, which really, if you get the cheeseburger in a regular bun, that's when you're going to really taste the grated cheese over there. So yeah, Lee's an example of a place to get a hamburger po' boy. You got your gas station po' boys, which are on the lower quality end,
but they can also be surprisingly good.
Yeah, sometimes. Okay, I mean, never get a hamburger po' boy at a gas station.
No,
a place to avoid. Unfortunately, the hamburger po' boy at Parkway Tavern, world famous for po' boys, that's a no-go right there. That they do the little kids po' boy with the low quality meat for some reason. Even food critic Tommy Fitzmaurice will warn you about that one. Rocky and Carlos in Chalmette has
which is outside of New Orleans.
Yeah, suburb of New Orleans, which is mainly on the map because of refineries. It's a refinery town. That's a little on the rural side. Rocky and Carlos has an excellent hamburger or cheeseburger po' boy. Delicious, because they're another one of those restaurants that gets bakery delivered French bread. We have Leidenheimer or say Gendusa. It's a couple of the bakeries that deliver French bread to restaurants.
That's correct.
Yeah.
But what if I told you, Brian, that our current version of a po' boy, what you and I think of as a traditional New Orleans po' boy, what if I told you that came about due to a history of or it came in conjunction with a labor strike?
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I'm
going. There are a lot of New Orleanians who haven't actually heard that story.
Well, I'm going to tell that story now. So in 1929, there was a streetcar strike in the city of New Orleans. The Amalgamated Association of Electric Street Railway Employees, Division 194, went on strike on July the 1st, 1929. The strike sent 1,800 unionized streetcar drivers and motormen off the job and onto the picket line. The strike was a labor dispute between the streetcar workers and what at the time was called the New Orleans Public Service, Inc., also known as NOPSI.
Yeah, NOPSI was in charge of that on into the early 90s.
I believe so.
As far out as there. And 1,800 streetcar drivers and attendants. I mean, that's there were a lot more streetcars out there back then, apparently.
Well, there was also, 1929, people, the motor vehicle was a new thing. And not everybody had that.
Yeah, and I think back then it was still called a motor coach.
Oh, yeah, probably.
Because it was essentially a horseless coach.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, within the first week, now, nationally, 1929 actually ranked as one of the most violent years of labor strife in history. And transportation strikes happened across the nation, and there were displays of public support and very passionate displays of public support as well. But within the first week of this strike, on July the 5th, union men and their sympathizers clashed with police as the company brought in scabs from New York to run the streetcars.
Oh, yeah. Damn Yankees,
Carpetbaggers.
Yeah, difference between a Yankee and a damn Yankee is a Yankee comes down to visit and then leaves. A damn Yankee comes down to visit and stays. So there's your difference. That's what we say down here,
Now, in response to this, streetcars and their storage barns were set on fire. Rails were blocked with timber and blocks of concrete, and scab drivers were attacked with bricks.
Wow.
And police would fire into the crowds at times as well. And 2 Union men were killed as a result of this tactic.
Ooh, those are the days when police could shoot you and get away with it.
Well, do you know?
Yeah, still that time. Yeah.
Do you know what else you could use in 1929? Still?
Yeah.
No. Do you know what else you could still use in 1929?
What else?
Dynamite. People would dynamite the streetcar tracks as well.
Oh yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So this was big violence citywide. Okay, this was not confined to one area. This was all over the place. And in fact, if you, as a listener, if you've ever come to the city and if you see the Green streetcars, the St. Charles streetcar, those likely survived being dynamited or burned down.
Yeah, those are antiques that are still going. Streetcar barn is on a side street off of Carrollton Avenue, fairly close to the river. I remember it was a few months ago, I drove past it. And what did I see inside? I saw a very old streetcar that, didn't look to be in as good a shape as the other green streetcars out there. I'm thinking, oh my Lord, wow. I mean, it's one that genuinely looks like an antique.
Right.
I couldn't believe my eyes. It looked like it's the one streetcar I've seen that looks like a museum piece. And it's still sitting in that barn. You go past the streetcar barn off of South Carrollton Avenue, and you could see it.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
During the day or in the evening time, when it's still open. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Okay.
Yeah, that's right around the end of the line for the St. Charles streetcar, because the St. Charles streetcar, it goes from you can get on it at South Carrollton Avenue and take it all the way to the foot of Canal Street via the Garden District, St. Charles Avenue, which is a beautiful streetcar ride that'll cost you $1.50. $1.50 for a nice scenic tour via streetcar of the Garden District all the way to Main Street, Canal Street. Or you could get on the streetcar at Main Street, Canal Street and view the beautiful world famous Garden District. Go all the way to St. Charles Avenue, get off on St. Charles Avenue, walk down historic Oak Street, which has buildings from the late 1800s made of sandstone with the names of former businesses still carved into the sandstone, including a couple of former banks. One of them is a Vietnamese pho restaurant that used to be a bank during the late 1800s or early 20s, early 1900s. And then you could get right back on the streetcar and go back downtown via the same, beautiful route. If you're staying downtown.
That's exactly right.
And so that's like $3 round trip,
which is probably in this city, it's probably the cheapest thing.
It's the cheapest touristy thing you can do is get on the streetcar from Carrollton or Canal, St. Charles streetcar, okay, the green one, and go the whole route, and then, do something on one end and get right back on it and go back the other way. $3 round trip. You can't beat it.
No. However, while streetcars today are typically full of riders, when the strike was going on, the streetcars that were not destroyed had police escorts, and citizens largely refused to ride them. So a common sight was an empty streetcar except for the driver and the police escort. Okay. Now, at this time, of course, when people strike, what usually happens to their wages?
They're not getting paid.
They're not getting paid. That's right.
Yeah,
So
I don't think there was such a thing as strike pay back then.
no, probably not. But of course, this means a lot of things, right? Like this means you don't have money. This means that you can't get food. You can't pay your light bill or whatever.
If you had electricity at your house back then, you might have just simply had, gas heating, gas light, gas stove.
That's true, but if you were getting, my point is that if you were getting the gas as a utility from NOPSI,
Well, that's right. You had to have money to pay for it.
you had to have money to pay for it. So Benny and Clovis Martin were brothers, and they had previously been streetcar conductors until they opened Martin Brothers Coffee Stand and Restaurant in the French Market in 1922. During the 1929 strike, after contract negotiations broke down, the Martin brothers understood that the strike could drag on endlessly. Now, this, as we said before, meant that the workers would likely run out of money. So the Martins worked with a baker named John Gendusa to develop a way to feed the striking workers.
Yeah, as we mentioned earlier, Gendusa.
Gendusa, that's right.
Still making French bread to this day.
They do still make French bread to this day. So there was a version of the po' boy before this, but they wanted a new type of French bread with untapered ends that was easier to slice so that there would be no waste. So you have to remember they're trying to feed these workers on a budget, and waste would not be a good thing. Okay. So John Gendusa developed the elongated tube-like French loaf of approximately 40 inches in length that was straight from end to end. Okay, so that was John Gendusa's creation, this particular type of French bread. Needless to say, it was an immediate hit. And the Martins expressed their support for the workers in a letter that said, "Our meal is free to any members of Division 194. We're with you until hell freezes, and when it does, we will furnish blankets to keep you warm."
Yeah, nice gesture. Yeah.
It is a nice gesture. And we are going to stop here to take a quick break. And we are back. Brian, you brought up something during the break that I actually forgot to put in my notes. Would you like to share that factoid with the audience?
This is something most New Orleanians already know, that French bread, because of our climate, it has maybe a little to do with our semi-tropical climate and the humidity. But you can only bake French bread in southern Louisiana. It can't be. It's been tried, but it can't be done anyplace else.
That's true.
Keep in mind. Okay, the bread that's used in, say, Philadelphia
for a Philly cheesesteak.
For a Philly cheesesteak is a different bread. Okay. It is very different from French bread.
It's still good though.
Yes, it's good in its own right. It's not French bread. So you can't bake French bread in Philadelphia, but I'm not so sure they miss it because they do just fine with their own bread for their, Philly steak cheese sandwiches. Pretty much. New York, the same thing with the Subway sandwich.
Right. For 4 months, thousands of po' boys were made free of charge to any striking worker looking for a meal. They would only do roast beef po' boys, which, fair enough. I mean, that's a good meal.
Yeah. Oh, yes, I agree.
And they would cut these 40-inch loaves in half, so they would get like a 20-inch sandwich.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, Benny Martin said that whenever we saw one of the striking men coming, we would say, "Here comes another poor boy." And over time, due to dialect, this was shortened to po' boy, which is how the sandwich gets its name.
Mm-hmm.
The union did accept an offer from NOPSI after the initial strike, but on October 29th, The stock market crashed and led the world into a decade-long depression. Shortly after the crash, NOPSI refused to even bargain with the union, and ultimately the depression benefited the employers, and the union wound up losing their battle. Most of the striking men found themselves unemployed, their jobs permanently taken by the scab drivers, and the sabotage of the streetcar drivers continued until April of 1930. Now, the generosity of the Martins, as well as the size of their sandwiches, still proved to be a wise business decision that earned them a good standing with the public and hundreds of new customers. As the Depression worsened, many residents took advantage of the oversized po' boys to feed themselves and their families, and the Martins would only charge 15 cents for the sandwiches.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a value. A 20-inch sandwich.
Yes. And, it was good because they possibly kept a lot of people from starving to death. In a time when, as we brought up before, food insecurity was just at an all-time high everywhere.
Yes, feeding your family back then was actually a challenge.
The Barton Brothers Cafe survived the Depression, and it became the most popular eating spot in town for many years. And of course, the po' boy was copied by countless restaurants in New Orleans. And the Martin Brothers remained in business until 1972, and the po' boy remains an iconic dish, and no other sandwich in history has the distinction of being created because of a labor battle.
Yeah, it's probably the one sandwich in the world that has the most unique history associated with it.
Yes, it is a very unique history for our unique city.
Yeah, very much so. And of course, there's, just like with the French bread itself, which essentially the quality of the bread is mainly what makes the sandwich. The quality of po' boys in the metropolitan New Orleans area can vary greatly. And just with the French bread, like an example of French bread that if you're not from here, you may want to avoid if you decide to just go to a store and buy some French bread and some sandwich meat and make your own sandwich for, say, that meal at your hotel that you're not eating out. You don't want to get the grocery store brand French bread.
No, don't do that. Spring for the Leidenheimers at the very least.
Right, Leidenheimer, yeah, Rising, Jadusa. And then, of course, there was, he mentioned
the Dong Fong.
The Dong Fong, yeah. If you are in one of our supermarkets and you see Dong Fong, grab it.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you're gonna pay more for the quality French bread than the store brand, but it is well worth it. I mean, what's $3.50 for a loaf of Risings? Leidenheimer.
Although I do feel compelled to warn you, you do have to consume the French bread relatively quickly, or it will get hard. Not necessarily like stale in the way that you would think of like stale sliced sandwich bread, but it will get very hard and kind of almost impossible to slice properly and make a nice sandwich with.
Yeah, it doesn't have a long shelf life. It may, you've got maybe 2 days. So down here, typically, when we buy French bread, it's to consume at least a portion of it that evening, that day.
Yes, yeah.
Preferably the rest of it the following day. Like Monday's a big day for French bread sales, typically in the New Orleans area, because of course Monday is the red beans and rice day. And of course, to go with your red beans and rice, you want some French bread to slice up with some butter.
Yes, we need to go get po' boys tomorrow.
I'm hungry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, tomorrow. Not tonight, because the only thing out there available tonight is gas station po' boys on Bank Street, which, as far as like quality goes there, you're pretty much limited to the hot sausage. It's like one of the po' boy secrets out there is that Just about everybody uses the Patton's hot sausage for their hot sausage po' boys. So the only thing different from one hot sausage po' boy to another one at most of the eating establishments is the bread, what bread they're using, because the hot sausage itself is the same everywhere. The Patton's hot sausage is just fine for po' boy sandwiches, especially. Well, yeah, like I said, yeah, hot sausage. Yeah, it's delicious. I love it with mayonnaise.
I like mustard on mine, but yes.
Yeah.
But that's the beautiful thing about po' boys is that you can get them a 1,000 different ways.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, dressed, of course.
Yeah, dressed.
Which means lettuce, tomato, pickle, mayonnaise, right?
Typically,
that's what dressed means. And if you say you want it dressed, that is what you're going to get. And if you don't want any of the things I just named,
you have to be specific.
Yeah, you have to say, oh, okay, dress, but I want mustard instead of mayonnaise is one example.
Or you don't want pickles or lettuce.
Yeah, dress without pickles, dress without lettuce. I'll typically say dress without lettuce because I'm not really a lettuce person. To me, lettuce is just something I hardly taste.
It's like a garnish, really, it seems like. I really think that leafy spinach is better, but I don't think leafy spinach would taste good on a po' boy.
No. Or fresh spinach another way is another way to describe it. Fresh spinach is whenever I get a sandwich from Subway, for example, whatever sandwich I get is going to have fresh spinach on it instead of lettuce, as it's something nutritious that actually has a taste to it. Lettuce has no nutrition and it's got nothing in it. It's like 0 calories. It's if you could put water on a sandwich,
it's crispy water.
It's crispy water, yeah, solid water, yeah. I really don't get regular lettuce on a sandwich. And for the record, I don't. When I eat a salad, I make sure the salad is fresh spinach based instead of lettuce based. If it's lettuce based, I'm not going to eat it.
Yeah. Well, in next week's episode, we are going to kind of go back to the beginning of where we started. And we're going to revisit the death penalty. We're going to be talking about Elmo Patrick Saunier, whose story was made into the book Dead Man Walking, which later on, of course, became the movie Dead Man Walking, which Susan Sarandon portrayed Sister Helen Prejean. And we're also going to be talking more about Sister Helen Prejean's views on the death penalty and why she feels compelled to be the spiritual advisor to some of the worst people that the state of Louisiana has to offer.
Yes, not necessarily a popular position, even with some Christians. But
it's always worth discussing.
This is an example of a time where a member of the clergy understands the church's role better than most people do.
Yes.
As it's important to remember that the most pious of Catholics in this instance are non-judgmental. That they're simply working to serve God and administer to everyone.
And not just serving God, serving the community.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. I think that's something that we kind of tend to forget, that gets lost in a lot of these discussions, is that they're supposed to be serving members of the community. They don't always succeed at it. But I do think that it is important to talk about people that do actually succeed at it.
Yes. A good church will administer to the needs of even the most unpopular people in a community.
But we will
because they consider it to be their duty.
Yes. But we will get into that discussion more next week. And until then, dear listeners, be safe, be kind, Don't park next to vans and eat good food.
Yes, and if you decide to order a ham and cheese po' boy, there are places where you actually have to specify whether or not uh, you want you want the ham, regular sandwich cold, okay, or if you want hot ham. There are
Mm.
places that do both. Okay, I just prefer ham and cheese po' boy. I just prefer just plain old ham and cheese. I don't need the ham to be hot. Uh, that's if it's dark, it's dangerous, and uh, you don't feel safe. Don't be there in the first place. Don't go there for a po' boy at the wrong time of the night. Okay. Yes, it could be dangerous to go to that Bank Street gas station late at night
Any
for a
gas
po'
station
boy
late
or
at
any
night.
gas station late at night. And uh, while leaving one of these gas stations with a po' boy where you probably shouldn't have gone in the first place late at night, if you were talking to law enforcement in a professional capacity and you are not the victim or the witness to a crime, lawyer up.